Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We're here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, cause we all gon' say, elevate, 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 higher, elevate, 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 higher. We gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Welcome to the Elev8 Podcast, everyone. It's so great to have you all on one more time. It's your boy Josh.
And Reg.
And we're grateful to be back on with you yet again on this beautiful, amazing Thursday night on a live show with the Elev8 boys. We are glad to be back. Oh, yeah. Feels good. We love doing this because, well, first of all, those who've been with us since the OG days, I've actually received a couple DMs the past couple weeks saying, I remember when you're doing like those TikToks on local Nova Scotian issues, and all of a sudden now look at the show's turned into, you're almost at 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. Baby, where are we going? And that is where we're at, because remember me and Reg back in the day, we used to do one show once a week, about an hour long, hour and a half. And it's nice to kind of get back to those, isn't it, Reg?
Yeah, I honestly love them. I think it's really great that we get to do the lives. And I think what makes it more fun, though, is the fact that we get to interact with all you folks, because honestly, some of the comments you drop in there are hilarious and it really can shape the evening. So keep sending those comments in, keep sending those super chats in. We'll definitely read them and make sure that you get that shout out that you so deserve. And honestly, like I said, it makes the show fun because it feels like you're with us in that sense. And I love it because it's a shout out to what we used to do, but at the same time, it's only better because we get to have you with us too.
Absolutely. And as exactly as Reg was saying, we have some things to talk about, some segments we're going to touch on. And so how it's going to work tonight is we're going to try to hit these segments, 2 or 3. And at the end of each segment is when we're going to address the super chats that are coming in for that segment. But to kick us all off, just for the sake of having some fun, we already have one super chat coming in real hot. And Chatty Lumpkin saying, love from Ontario, dropping $50 on the homies. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. But Reg, I know you've been doing a lot of work. It's been a busy week. It's been a crazy week. This election's kind of weird. Polls are weird. I'm feeling weird. I'm feeling sick. I got sick twice. Once before Fredericton, once after Fredericton. I shook so many hands. I'm probably one of you guys who did it to me. No, just kidding. All love here. All love. But the election, people are just like, all right, we're seeing what's happening on the ground with some of these Polyev events, and we're seeing Carney's events in pubs where he's dropping some beer on the homies in front of 5 people saying, hey, vote Liberal. I'm with you. I am the man of the people. And then you have Polyev, who's actually a man of the people, signing hard hats in Oshawa today. Getting endorsements from unions. It's a weird time. And then we look at the polls and it's like, it's a little close. And in some cases, the Liberals are winning. So what has been going on? I know there's some who've been talking about it already, but Reg, he's our resident research man. He looked right on into it.
Yeah, so it's one of those things. I don't know if everybody caught the Oshawa event. I know the pleb was streaming that earlier, so shout out to the pleb for putting that up there for us all to be able to view. But basically what I'm going to drop on you is a little bit of a political polling 101 for you. So I hopefully won't put you to sleep, but we'll try and run through it as efficiently as possible. So we'll get right into it. So when we look at the major polls in Canada, we've got quite a few, actually. There's quite a few that have popped up recently. I think that people realize there's money to be made in these. Ooh. And so I've highlighted 2 kind of almost as the best and the worst. So if you look at it, and it's also interesting, and I'm not saying this because of the way that the votes pan out too, because you see the worst is like 47.5 and 35, a 10-point difference between the Conservatives and the Liberals. And then with Abacus, you see it's exactly the same. What I'm looking at is like, look at the other side, the sample size. We've got 1,800 respondents versus 847. So when I look at this, there's a couple things I'm looking at. And so I want to get into the methodology a little bit here for you. So forgive me, I'm a bit of an academic. This is my wheelhouse. So I'm gonna lay some truth on you all. So when you look at the methodology of a poll, there's a couple things we need to look at. We need to look at the sample size, that's your N value, the sample method, so that's how they're getting the information, the weighting, so how they're weighting that information, the margin of error, and the wording for that. So we look at our best example. We look at Abacus data. So what you're seeing here is that they posted their question, and they actually posted kind of the information that they had got from that question. So the region, the sex, the age, they post all of the weighted and unweighted numbers of information in that. And so what that tells us is that tells us our sample size. So you go to the next one there. So what they've said, they said they had a total of 1,800 people surveyed. So that's people who've completed the survey. So that might not be the people who answer that question. So when you look at the people who actually answered that question, it's 1,584. So not quite your 1,800. And then what they've done is they weighted the responses. So your responses actually went up, because what they needed to do was they needed to adjust it so that it looked kind of like what the census data was saying about, the range of people across the country. So that's, trying to adjust it so that if they had more people that were in the older category that were answering the questions, they actually weighted them less. And then if there's people, who are male or female, or if they're from a different region or whatever, they move the numbers around so that they more accurately reflect the kind of composition of the country. So, sample method. So when you look at the sample method, there's a couple ways that people can do it. With this particular survey, this was basically done on the internet. They have a bunch of individuals that they have already in the queue that are already signed up, saying that they will answer surveys on a regular basis. But other ways that you can do it, you can call people on the phone. You can do the robocalls, which is that IVR, interactive voice response. So that's where you basically have a pre-recorded, and it's like, would you vote Mark Carney in the election? Press 1. And that's basically how that is done. We've all probably gotten them before. They're really annoying. Not a lot of people actually take the time to do them, but c'est la vie. Next, we move on to that weighting. So I kind of touched on this a little bit already, but when we look at specifically the Abacus data, which I kind of hold as the gold star for polling after looking at all the different polls, we still see that 60 and over were overrepresented. They weighted that. We see Quebec, Alberta, and BC all underrepresented, which they had to try and weight that again. And so what that tells me is that Quebec is already right now saying that they're thinking more conservative, but they're also still heavy on the block. But yet when you look at these polls, Quebec is looking liberal. And so when you see these kind of things, you're going, okay, well, how accurate is that actually if there's not a lot of Quebecers answering? So if there's a few Quebecers answering and they are all answering liberal, and we have to push that weight up to get it to match the census data for the country, you're going to artificially basically inflate all of the responses coming out of Quebec. So that's what you're seeing happen with some of this. And same with Alberta and same with BC. Atlantic Canada, which we know is very liberal, unfortunately, very overrepresented. Basically, every response that somebody gave in Atlantic Canada, they had to cut in half because we basically doubled the amount that would be appropriate for a census. So next one, margin error. Nothing really to see here. Basically, people put them on these polls, but they don't really mean anything because margin of error is basically if you do a real sample of you talking to people on the street, everybody has a chance to kind of be interviewed. These are online polls taken from a specific subset of people that have already agreed that they're going to do a poll. So you know what your sample is going to be. You know what those people are coming from. So it's kind of a bias there anyway. So it doesn't really matter. And then lastly, wording. So
it's my world, baby.
Angus Reid, you're getting called out. So this was one that actually hit Twitter, or X, sorry.
Hey.
So what we are looking at here is basically the wording that they're using is very, very misleading. And you're kind of giving two options here. You've got the none of the above and the don't know, sure. Okay, but the two answers there, one, they're saying Pierre is a radical extremist. And the next one is saying Pierre is going to bow down to Trump. And then very small in the bottom, you go, none of the above and not sure. Yeah. It's where's the other neutral options? Usually when you're designing surveys, when you're designing things like that, you try and keep things on almost like a Likert scale where you got your strongly agree at the very top statements, your strongly disagree statements at the bottom, and you're neutral in the middle. And none of this is followed with that at all, not even a little bit. So Angus Reid's information, showing that they're fully in liberal territory, why wouldn't you be with a question like that? If you're somebody reading this and you're, I don't know, not as astute and you're looking at this going, Pierre's a radical extremist, or Pierre's going to bow down and kiss the feet of Trump. Oh, you know what I mean? And it just kind of also follows the same rhetoric that you're seeing on the CBC, that you're seeing on the CTVs, the Globe and Mails, which are, we know, government funded media sources. So if you've already got these government funded media sources priming people with these same terminologies, and then you put that in your polling, you're going to get that kind of thing come out of it. So next. Ecos, another one.
Call them out. Call them out.
So this is another problem with bias. So we already know that the owner of Ecos has said that he hates Pierre Poilievre. He doesn't want to see him become prime minister. And so that kind of bias seeps into the questions that they ask. Now, the questions that they ask are not made public. They will not let you see them. That's the difference between Abacus data and some of these other polls, is Abacus will actually show you the question and then show you the percentages. These guys won't. They'll just tell you the percentages and their interpretation. And so when I'm looking at this and I'm looking at their age group demographics, and we're seeing that the under 35 crowd, which we know are conservative mostly based off of other information that we have, that they had to weight it up to 210 because they only got 92. So that means they had to double the weighting for that. And then when you look at the over 65, which we know is heavily liberal favoring, is at 319, and they had to weight it down to 200. Like, this is the problem, is that you're overinflating these opinions or trying to deflate them, right? So, and like I said, I pulled out his direct quote here. He says, I'm going to poll this week. I'm going to show in clear empirical terms that PP is a magnet for racist Canada. Is that clear? Data to follow. It's like, this is the problem, is that, you know, it's basically like the trust the science bro crap, because as somebody who works with data on a regular basis, you can make that say whatever you want, depending, like I said, on your sample sizing, how you word it, what biases you're including,
Framing.
and your framing, and then knowing what priming is also out there. And then lastly, I'm going to just show you the CBC poll tracker. So the CBC poll tracker is showing Mark Carney like way out in the lead, not quite as badly as Ecos and Angus Reid are. But if you go to the next, what's interesting about this one, it says how the polls are averaged. So I blew that up a bit for you all to see. And it says every publicly available poll is included in this average. So that means you're getting the Ecos, you're getting the Angus Reid, you're getting those ones that are extremely biased, pulling that in the opposite direction. So go to the next one there. Oh, I didn't include it, but But basically, the other slide that I was going to show you is basically showing the poll trackers, basically distribution, and it shows it being basically pulled because of these wacko polls that are out there.
That's unparliamentary,
So,
sir.
I know. Good thing we're not in Parliament. But so this is why when you're looking at the polls and people are like, polls are wrong, the polls are lying to you, and you go on CBC and CBC's like, oh, well, we averaged everything out. And they put their own weighting on it too that they are not releasing. So this is the thing, right? Is that if you're an individual at CBC and you're going, oh, this guy's going to cut my job if I don't get Carney elected, maybe I'll just change the weighting on some of how these polls show up because I feel that they're more credible than others. And, you know, it'll all come out in the wash because it will look like a really good representative sample because we've used everything available. So this is how you lie with numbers. And this is exactly what you're seeing. So that's why when you're at an event like Oshawa today, where they basically packed out the room and you're like, how in the hell are the polls showing that this is not a reality? It's because of these reasons. It's because this is how you lie. This is how you add bias. And like I said, even our gold star here on Abacus data, like, you know, they're doing the best that they can, but their data is basically built off of inflated numbers where, you know, like I said, Quebec and Alberta and BC are underrepresented, and Atlantic Canada is overrepresented, and it's the same with the over 65 crowd. So these metrics that would favor Liberals are overrepresentative in the polling data. But like I said, I'll give Abacus data a huge shout out because they are doing their best to try and bring those back into alignment with their weighting. It's just, it's a feature that data, that they're doing the best they can with what they have to work with. And that's why you see their averages actually looking like the same, because there is quite a few folks in Atlantic Canada that are saying that they're going to vote Liberal. I'm hearing it in my circles, and unfortunate as it is, the narrative is working, but that is why the polls look weird.
Right. So then it comes back to the question, right? Is what do you think is going on right now? Because like you said, there's so much weirdness, and you kind of broke it down in a more academic perspective of like what is happening. And to kind of ask more specifically, do you think Abacus, you said, is the most credible? Are they the only ones you said that are releasing their essentially how they come up with their numbers?
I can't remember off the top of my head how many of them were actually releasing their numbers, but I know for a fact that the ones at the top, like you had to go through.
We're back. All right. All right. We're back, folks. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. And so it's funny. Okay. I'm going to address this quickly right now. I'm already seeing people in the chat. You need to look at the chat. I told you at the beginning of the show, we'll look at the chat at the end of the segment. Hold your horses. We got a freaking show to run here. Shut up. All right. So it comes back to kind of like the issues of what we're seeing, right? This is distracting. Is you kind of talking about the different ways they're kind of coming up with the data, the way they're phrasing questions, the weighting, the people at a representative. I'll tell you straight up right now, as a UX designer who's done a lot of these surveys, who has tried my best to find the best data possible to be able to inform design decisions that link to business outcomes, I can tell you this right now. If I took an ECOS poll in terms of the way they got their data, or I took a lot of these polls and how they got their data, it would have been thrown out by the board of directors. They said, no, go get some real data because we can't trust this stuff because I'm not putting my money into a product that hasn't verified the data. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what would have happened with the way they went about getting their data. So that should tell you enough. If that's how a board of directors would deal with me as a UX designer who's trying to get data to link design work to business outcomes, how do you think as a Canadian you should be reacting to it? And that's why things are looking a little weird. Everything's kind of got that sway to the left. We see it in the media, and now the polls are reflecting it. And I'm not trying to be one of those people, oh, the polls are fake. Well, the polls have bias. That's what I'll say about that. And it's also trying to sway public opinion to disincentivize a specific group of voters is what the outside looking in can look like.
Yeah, and I think the big thing to say is like, there's going to be no data without bias.
Yeah.
Like humans are biased. So we can do our best to eliminate that as much as possible. But that's just the fact of it. And the other part of it too is just how we're getting that information. Like I'm looking at this going, I think most of my conservative friends are in jobs where they don't have a second to pick up the phone because they're, swinging a hammer or turning a wrench or, doing something physical. And that, their blue collar crowd are the people who are mostly going to vote conservative. And so they don't have time in the middle of their day while they're on a 2-hour long Zoom call to fill out in Abacus data or Angus Reid or Ecos or any of those different polls. They just don't have that time. So I think that you're going to get some bias in that way as well. So it just, it is what it is. And we just have to take it at face value and take it with a grain of salt and realize that the only votes that matter are the votes on election day. So take what you will with the polls. But again, if it makes you angry, if it makes you mad, use that to fuel your outreach to others and make sure that you're voting conservative, I guess.
Yeah. Go out and vote. Vote. And one point here we'll hit before we get to the super chats here is this kind of came up is a lot, again, about the idea of polls. We have polling market, the betting markets, where they have Carney ahead by so much. 66% to Poilievre's 35%. And right now, if you're feeling like a betting man, I'd put some money on Pierre Poilievre, see if you can make some money on it. Because even people are like, oh, there's big money that's swaying these. What is happening? Is Mark Carney really winning by that much? Well, Brittany earned herself to be a piece of our segment today, which she called out on X today. Because a lot of people who bet on Poly Market are from America. There's a little bit of a segment from Canada, but a lot of it's from America. And how does the America system work, right? It's the Democrats that are blue, and it's the Republicans that are red. And she brought us like, I think these people think they're voting conservative when they are actually voting the liberals. Mm-hmm. And she brought this up. Where
but also, like the purple line there, it's like Chrystia Freeland.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually hilarious. But then you look at what she brought up here is the different people who have said yes to Polyev. Biden for Prez is the username, saying they're betting that Polyev's going to win. And then MAGA King says Polyev's not going to win. These people literally are voting the opposite with their dollars right now. And I think there's something to be said about it, which is kind of funny. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Oh, I totally agree. When you brought that up, it's like, yep, that's exactly what's happening there. There's no way Biden for Prez is going to be supporting Pierre Polyev, but we got to get to you guys on the super chats here.
Oh, they can relax for 2 seconds. Okay, holy smokes! Just want to see if I can get top holders here. Yeah, MAGA King right there is a no for Polyev. Biden for Prez is a yes. Any other things I can give away? Nothing else. So interesting. So interesting. All right. Let's pull up the old super chats, shall we? Wow, we got some catching up to do. All right. Miles says, do you think Pierre has the balls to take risks?
I don't know. I think that will remain to be seen, honestly. I think we saw I think it was CIBC came out today and said that we should not be counter-tariffing. Mm-hmm. Their CEO basically saying this is a bad idea, which we've been screaming from the rooftops for a while now, saying this is a bad idea. And I liked what I saw today, which we covered in the afternoon video around the different approaches where, Pierre Polyev saying that he's going to cancel the GST on the auto sector. And then you've got Carney saying, we're going to counter tariff and we're going to use the money and we're going to give it to the automakers. And it's like, I hate this. This sounds like Green Slush Fund, like 2.0, 3.0, whatever. You know what I mean? Just another way for us to like see money disappear. So don't like that at all. So that was a different approach for him because before he was like counter tariffs, rah, rah, rah. So that to me said, okay, he took a risk, he took a chance, and I'm liking that I'm seeing that. So I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I'm happy to see that the economists are starting to get some listen time from the politicians, because I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I'm just going by what I've read and what I'm seeing. I'm like, from all aspects, this was always a bad idea to counter tariff. It just didn't make any sense. And I'm not an expert by the slightest. And I was like, to the point I was feeling like I was being gaslit because all the parties were all saying the same thing about counter tariffs. I'm like, this really seems like a bad idea.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see the conservatives change their tone on it. Like, no, we're going to go for something a little more constructive that will actually help our people and try to de-escalate the issue with the state, which I can appreciate.
Yeah, well, one is an incentive and one is a tax, is what you're looking at, right? So that's the difference.
Carrot and stick, baby.
Yep.
Just Me Nicole, the OG baby, says, I'm in Quebec, never had or know anyone that got polled, and with close to 800 clients, dog grooming here, most are voting Polyev.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? And Nicole, you're totally right. And thanks again for the other one that we saw up there saying to smash the like button.
Oh, yeah.
Appreciate it. Yeah, exactly, right? We're seeing and hearing from people saying like, hey, I would actually vote Polyev. And one of the things that Juno News actually covered, because they had a discussion about the polls today, actually, was that one of the questions that usually gets asked when you're trying to create something credible is, how do you think your neighbor is going to vote? And that's a question that's not really showing up in Canadian polling. And what they've noticed is that people are usually bad at being truthful on how they're going to vote, but are really good at like identifying how their neighbor is going to vote.
I caught that in COVID, didn't I?
And yeah, exactly. And so basically what it does is it adds credibility because people go, oh, well, I'm not going to get in trouble if I say that my neighbor is going to vote conservative. And then you actually get a better representative sample because you can say, okay, here's what people said their intention is, and here's what they say that their neighbor's intentions are. And it's usually somewhere in the middle for that. So
that's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 flips and 5 twists says, boys, you're almost at 100K. Stoked for you to get your well-deserved 100K subs YouTube plaque button. Same with us, sir.
Yes.
We're craving it right now. What are we, 6K away?
Yeah, we are.
Baby.
I think it's like every morning, Josh and I have a phone call, and it's like, we're 5, we're 7, we're 6, we're 6.5. Like, it's just getting so excited. We're like, we're having a party. It's going to be big.
Yeah. We're going to see. The joke is like, will Josh have a baby or will Josh get 100K subs beforehand? We'll see what happens.
So my vote is that I think that we're going to get 100K before your baby is born. But you said the other day that you think the baby's going to come first.
I don't know. Baby's coming sometime in the next 5 days. So I am like, or it could be longer. I don't know. But things are moving along pretty quick, baby. So I don't know. Yeah. We'll see.
You can't go to your wife and be like, push it out now. We got to beat Reg. I know you're that competitive.
True. We are going to go over a lot of bumps today. Theorica says, Jugmeat doing his best to virtue signals with liberals. Somebody needs to tell Jugmeat that it's G-Fans that Carney founded, not only fans. Glad to be here, gents. Cheers from BC. Oh, that's savage, dude. So here's the thing, folks. I didn't bother covering that story because it was such a nothing burger on so many levels. I was like, first off, NDP are useless. Like, no one really cares about them right now, and they're nowhere even near the picture. And then secondly, just this, it's on. I mean, it's on brand for them at this point. Like, it is what it is. Like, having an OnlyFans person come on, influencer, to talk about politics on your campaign that's a move.
Yeah, that's a decision, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and it was funny because, there's some channels out there that made like such a big deal out of this, and it's like, it really kind of isn't a big deal at all, right? I mean, who cares? Like, the world is a tough place right now. If you got to do whatever you got to do to make your dollar, great. But, is that the person that you need to be out there advertising for you? Not likely. I mean, marketing says sex sells. I don't know, but that wouldn't be my first move, especially where we're seeing right now with parties like kicking out people left, right, and center for anything and everything. This is an odd move for them.
Yeah, and five flips to twists also said, hey, Josh, be careful. There's times that the baby does come very late, especially on the first one. So we'll see who wins. All right. Let's go. Last Mile says, can the Conservatives win Atlantic Canada? I'll give that to you first, sir.
No, I don't think so. Okay. I hope to God I'm wrong. I do not think that they will.
Okay.
I think there's some that will definitely go blue, but I think that the Conservatives have not done a good enough job creating community in key ridings. And I think that's what it is. I think that Conservatives have been too hard to reach in some ridings. I think that they haven't done what they need to do to community build. And I know that we've seen that in all over Canada and in different parties and different ridings, but specifically in Atlantic Canada, I think that the Conservatives have not done a good enough job. Like the fact that I can call up Rick and he answers the phone right then and there and will text me and he's in his community. You see him out there. I used to get, because before they split up the ridings, Rick was actually my MP, and I used to get mail outs for him, at least twice, 3 times a year. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm hearing from you. I realize that my riding is now brand new, but with that said, Lena Diab, the Liberal candidate for my riding, already sent out a mail out to letting everybody know, hey, you're in a new riding now. It's changed. Here's the boundaries. Here's my thing. The interesting thing, I wish I would have brought it for you all. So the Lena Diab, who's a Liberal, her mail out looked almost identical to Rick's. It was even navy blue.
Oh, wow.
Like, not even joking. Like, her outfit was red, but the whole thing was navy blue. Her name and like it looked exactly like Rick's. I was like, that's sneaky, friggin' Liberal candidate.
Well, I mean, and it is smart, because what happens when you're going to the polls and you're going to lock in your decision. There's no color coding there. It's just the names.
Yeah.
And that's the one way to do word association. It's sneaky. It's sneaky. I got to admit. Interesting moves. And I'll say for me, can the Conservatives win Atlantic Canada? I do agree with you, Reg, that there's been just a weird lack of outreach by the Conservatives in Atlantic Canada. And I know there's a lot of old heads, a lot of rural communities with older people that would prefer someone like Mark Carney. I know Sean Fraser is expected to re-win his riding. And I really hope he wins his riding with them getting like 50 seats in the House, and he actually has to do his job, and with being a losing party. That'd be hilarious. That would actually be great payback. I'd love to see that happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, like even from anecdotally talking to some people, it's just, yeah, it's weird. A lot of people are leaning toward Carney here for whatever reason. Because of his blah personality, because of his boring, posture, there's kind of a reason why people are leaning to him. Is because like, oh, he represents normalcy. Politics have been too crazy south of the border, and now north of the border. We just want off this ride. And what I'm seeing is a similar behavior we saw with America in the 2020 election with Biden. Things were so crazy with Trump. Everyone was attacking Trump. Media was crazy, blah, 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 blah. And there's like, Biden's a sense of normalcy. We'll vote Biden. I'm kind of getting a similar vibe out here.
Yeah.
Biden.
And the other thing that I think about too is the fact that when we look at our economic makeup, I know that, in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, in PEI, there's a lot of forestry, agriculture, and aquaculture, but there's also a lot of universities. Like we have a lot of post-secondary education in Atlantic Canada. And I think that plays into it too, right? We have a lot of academics. We have a lot of ties to those academic institutions. And Mark Carney is like epitome academic institution. He went to Oxford, you know what I mean? Like Harvard, like all these, almost kind of like the dream schools for folks here in Atlantic Canada. Like we've always heard our whole lives, like these are where the smart people go. And we want to elevate ourselves to that, upper echelon of society. So I think that where you're seeing other provinces that are very much like industrious, entrepreneurial, Atlantic Canada has been very much a like take the government handout and go to university for umpteen years. I mean, I'm a case example, right? I'm currently pursuing my doctorate, so like I'm looking at this, and the folks that I work with on a regular basis, they're also academics, and they're all going, Mark Carney's the way. And also, I'll tell you this interesting little tidbit. I got into a little bit of a Facebook war with my institution, with Dalhousie University, because they put out this post that was so biased. It was just like, Mark Carney is known as the greatest economist that the West has ever seen, or something to that effect. It was this outlandish statement. And then it goes on to say, make sure you catch like Professor so-and-so's lecture on economics and Mark Carney. And I was like, for Dalhousie University to put that out there, it just looks like an endorsement. And I wrote back to them. I was like, this is like definitely not nonpartisan. This is not encouraging insightful debate. This is not encouraging critical thinking, which are basically what a university is supposed to be founded on, but it's not. It's just an echo chamber for the left. And this is why I get so mad with publicly funded post-secondary education, because I'm looking at this going, you're supposed to represent everyone because you're funded by us. You're funded by everyone. You get subsidized immensely, and you're not being partisan. So I think they're looking at this going, if we support Mark Carney and he wins, like maybe we'll get some kind of money coming down the line. Like that's what I think, and that's what I read into it.
And that's what I'll go back to the flip side of all this. You have, as you said, the academia. The problem with the academia in Atlantic Canada, it's all concentrated to like 3 ridings. And one thing you have to think about is the fishers and the harvesters that have really got ticked off by Mark Carney and the Liberals lately. And you have a lot of the blue collar workers who are just like, screw these guys. And they talk to their families, who then talk to their people, who then talk to their people. And I'm also seeing a big swath of population in the province who are just kind of over the Liberal mentality as well. So that, like, it's just like, I'm seeing there's strong reasoning for both who could win here. And we'll see what happens with people who go to the polls.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing, though. It's not one riding, though. When you look at the metropolitan areas, it's like all these tiny little ridings, all in Halifax proper. And then you see all these tiny little ridings in Cape Breton, like within like the Cape Breton regional municipality. And then same within the valley. So because they're going off of population, right? So, and then you see these massive, great big areas that cover, where all of your aquaculture and your agriculture and all those more traditionally blue collar conservative leaning votes go. And so they cover great big areas. And then, like I said, and then your metropolitan areas that are more left, that a lot of times we see Halifax go towards the NDP or Liberal. It's like 10 different ridings in that kind of geographic area.
And in saying that too, I agree. There's typically a lot of NDP Liberal support in those ridings. I've been shocked by the amount of blue signs I've been seeing in these areas as I drive through. And like that's been catching my attention too. So we'll see what happens. We've kicked that horse and killed it.
Yeah.
All right, we move on though. Cher says, in BC, I have not gotten any calls for polls. I have a couple of young people, 20 and 22. They ask who I am voting for, 59-year-old female. Conservative all the way. They said Liberals. I asked them why, and their answers are Carney's resume, which is a classic meme.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? I mean, it's a very powerful narrative. And I keep pushing the same, narrative back at people when they say, oh, well, Carney's done this, Carney's done that. And I'm like, and they're like, and Pierre's only ever been a politician. I'm like, right, but in any other industry, in any other field, where do we penalize people for knowing what they want to do and then putting all their energy into doing that? Nowhere else do we criticize people. We don't say, why was my doctor not a pole vaulter? Like, we never do that. So, and usually when I have that conversation with people, they kind of go, oh yeah, that is a little bit weird. But I will say I was the same way. I was bamboozled by the resume. And then when you realize that when you get into a certain level, a certain upper echelon of people that, all know each other, we saw the same thing happen with the Port Authority and the Health Authority in Nova Scotia, where the CEO of the Port Authority, which has nothing to do with health, was moved over to be CEO of the Health Authority. Because basically once you reach a certain level of status, they just move you around into all these fancy CEO, C-suite, executive level. They're executive leaders, and a lot of these positions are recruited from an executive pool. So he could have a laundry list of careers because they basically just move them and recycle them, and they don't care what their backgrounds are. They just keep moving them, and there's prestige to the fact that they've held these positions at a leadership level. And so that's nothing to say anything negative against the CEO of the Health Authority. But the thing is that she's not a doctor. She got that role as CEO of a health authority because she was already in the executive pool as the CEO of the Port Authority. So I look at Carney and I'm like, they just moved him around because he's older. You look at the age difference between him and Pierre, right? I mean, Pierre joined when he was 25. Mm-hmm. So he said, I care about Canada. Like anybody else, like an entrepreneur, if we would look at an entrepreneur and say, wow, you started a business at 25 and now you're super successful. Like the highest level of success a person can be in politics is to run for the Prime Minister of Canada. Yeah. And he's got there. So when you look at that and you kind of use the same ruler, talking about measures, right? I would look at that and go, wow, Pierre is super successful. He knew what he wanted at a young age, pursued until he got to the highest ranking spot that he can possibly get. And now it's on the people. Whereas Carney just moved around because he was already in the club.
Failed upwards as per usual. Fanny says, work in Windsor at an automotive plant. A lot of people in here are voting Pierre, and I'd believe it. 100% believe it. As someone who has family who worked in the factories in Oshawa, I believe it. Rage says, first time voter from BC voting Pierre. Wow. Wow. Just me Nicole coming in hot again. Which side do you think newer immigrants lean towards? I have something very interesting to share about this, actually, because I had a phone call this week of someone literally, they called me. We're good friends, who has a specific footprint in one of the bigger communities in the immigrant community here in Canada. He started yelling my ear off about what the heck are the conservatives doing. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he started laying off all these issues that are going on. And he said, yeah, the conservatives have really ticked off the Hindu community here in this country. And apparently the Hindu community is going to be voting PPC in protest this election. Yeah. Because of the lack of work and lack of calling out Khalistanis. Mm-hmm. That's what they're upset about. And they don't feel protected by the political class here in this country. So that's again, one segment of the immigrant community. And so when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's true. There's something crazy going on there. And, but then kind of on the broader scale of just kind of new immigrants to the country, of course, a lot of them are going to lean towards conservative, and they traditionally do. We've had a lot of new immigrants who have actually reached out to the show thanking us for what we're doing here. There's like white Canadian guys who get what I think. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I've been living here so long and all I've been talking to is liberals. I'm like, are these people nuts? Then you guys, I see this podcast pop up and you guys are talking some common sense. I'm voting Pierre Poilievre, and I love watching the show. I love what you guys are doing. I was like, oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And so it's like any of the new immigrants who've reached out to our show are very much voting blue. So there is a weird thing happening right now in our country when it comes to that.
So I had the pleasure of talking to two new immigrants, one from Slovakia and another one from Egypt.
Nice.
And so they're both in the boat of, I'm trying to get my information where I think you're supposed to get it from, and I'm getting it from CBC because that's what I'm told is the information source. And they're going, from everything that I'm reading, I'm supposed to vote liberal. And I'm like, right, because that's what the state-funded media will tell you. And I was basically like, what are the things that you want? And they're like, we just want to take home more of our paycheck. We want to be able to do the things we want to do. We want to be able to own homes. And I'm like, right. I was like, that's the platform of the Conservative Party. And they're like, well, then why, when I read the CBC, do I not see any of that? And I'm like, that's the question, isn't it? And one guy, he even said, well, I don't read the CBC because I know that everybody says it's not good, that I shouldn't read it because it's biased. They get $2 billion. And so obviously they're just a mouthpiece. And I come from a country where I've witnessed that. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. And he's like, but, I was reading the Globe and Mail, but anything that looks like it's conservative is behind the paywall. And I don't want to pay the, $10 a month for the subscription. So I just read the free articles, and all the free articles are all pro Carney. Amazing how that happens, right?
Yeah, that works.
And so I think that you're seeing some new immigrants really questioning, who to vote for, and then trying to do the right thing, which would be go to the established media and, get an unbiased, or at least both sides of the equation. And they're not getting that. And so they're kind of looking at this going, this is weird. Yeah. And I think that's the title of the election. It's a weird one.
Dude, every conversation I've been having with my friends who are in Ottawa, who have connections to Ottawa, who understand how the political game works here in the country, they've all called me saying the exact same thing. Things are weird, and I can't put my finger on what's going on, but things are a mess. Things are discombobulated. Both campaigns are it's just a weird feeling that we're getting all around. And the polls are saying one thing, the media's saying this, the crowds on the ground are looking like that, Carney's doing this, and it's just like no one knows what to make of it. All you can do is show up on election day and vote, because that's all we'll know at this point. It's a weird time. This is one of the weirdest times and one of the craziest moments that our country's ever hinged on an election. I have to admit, talking to even my wife, not from here, doesn't get Canadian politics. I'm like, this is the most consequential election I've ever seen in my lifetime. And she's like, that seems like a bit of an exaggeration. I'm like, I wish it was. I wish it was as simple as me going crazy, but it's not. It's not.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I talked to my grandparents about this, because I was like, you guys are old as the hills, so you're going to have insight into things that I won't, because you've lived it. And shout out to my grandfather. He just turned 79 today. Woo! So good for him. But what I asked them, I said, has there ever been a time that felt like this? And my parents were like, no. And my grandparents were like, the closest thing that I can remember that would be like this was when Trudeau Sr. left power.
Yeah.
And they were like, that was a little bit turbulent. And there was a lot of talk about what is this going to look like? And what happened there is we ended up with a conservative government. That was Brian Mulroney who got in after that. He defeated, Mr. Turner, who again was placed in power, but at least Mr. Turner was elected before.
Right.
Like it wasn't like this where it was a drop in.
For some globalist dropping in.
Yeah. But the difference though is that at that point in time, the media wasn't so funded by the government.
Yeah.
The difference with this one and that they've noticed and they talk about is that there's not two sides to any story anymore. There's only one side and it's a red side. Mm-hmm. And they're like, we notice it. We feel it. It's very different than any election in the past. And so I think that is the piece that makes this so weird is that we are collectively being gaslit by our government and by our media. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. Right. So,
and there's the extra layer to it as well, is this is different this time around as well. Mm-hmm. Even in 2021, when I was talking to Candace from Juno News, we were talking before we did our show. And she's like, yeah, back in 2021, it was just kind of us, True North News, and like, I think one other like independent outlet. Like that's all it was around, even for the 2021. Now we're here in 2025. Look at all the independent creators that have just emerged, even in the past year. Mm-hmm. It's a lot. So you have what's happening with the gaslighting in the media, happening with the mainstream. Then you have all the independent voices that are getting very loud, and some a little too loud for the comfortability of the establishment on both sides of the aisle. And it's just adding a new layer, a little bit of a curveball, something this big pot of stew of this election that just people are just like, what do I do with this? It's very interesting.
Yeah, well, we saw from the Rage Index, like trust in institutions is like in the toilet, right? So, I mean, and that's both left and right. I mean, we saw some even left creators that are getting a lot more clout. Some of them even becoming potential CTV fact checkers and then quickly getting removed from that position.
Dude.
Sorry, Rochelle.
Oh, man. Yeah, she's going on an apology tour. Actually, no, she's going on the I'm crying tour about that one.
I know.
All right. Brad Tien says one man / party has been saying the same thing for 10 years. One party has done 180 on their own policies, etc. in the last 30 days.
So right. I mean, and the funny part is that the Liberals create the problem at the pumps. And they're like, they put this gas tax on, and then afterwards they remove it, and they're like, "We're the heroes." It's like,
why are we so awesome?
It's like you created the problem in the first place, and then half cleaned it up, and we're like, "Where's my award?" Well, I did such a good job.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Exactly. It is so funny to watch. Angus says, why does Atlantic Canada vote Liberal? When all the youth are working in Alberta, Liberals are killing our energy industry. That's killing the high-paying jobs in Alberta. Make it make sense.
Yeah.
That's I think you touched on it earlier. It comes down to the history of it also being a have-not province for a long time and having to rely on government subsidies and not wanting those to go away, especially when the rhetoric has been, Poilievre comes in, he's axing everything. Look what Trump's doing south of the border. He's going to do that to your benefits. He's going to do that to X, Y, and Z things. And that's kind of getting people a little like, I don't want to see that happen. That's a layer of it. I'm not saying that's the whole thing, but that's a part of it.
Yeah. And honestly, we get billions of dollars in equalization here, which I think that I've said this before, and I know probably would upset a lot of Atlantic Canadians, but I think they need to start phasing out our equalization because it's just like the kid who won't leave home. You got to make it painful so that they actually do something. The best innovations and the best changes to a society happen when there's some kind of crisis happening. That's how we got computers, was from a world war, right? You know what I mean?
Wow.
So we have to phase that equalization out, get out of mom and dad's basement and start doing things for ourselves.
And Shadow Billy Bob says, make it too big to rig. That's been the mantra of the right throughout this whole election.
Amen.
Let's keep her going.
I'm not even religious, and I'll say amen.
Amen. So be it. Portuguese Pie saying, hey guys, how's the live stream going tonight? Just left the Pierre rally in Oshawa not too long ago. Just tuning in. What a turnout it was. Dude, we saw the video footage. Shout out to Pleb for getting on the ground there. Pretty sure he's in Oshawa, right? Yeah, he was there.
Yeah.
And the crowds were in. It seemed like the energy was electric in Oshawa tonight. So that was cool to see. And thanks for tuning in, Portuguese Pie. Love to see your channel. You are popping off. Keep up the great work, my guy. You're doing awesome. Gary McDonald says, my brother worked at a business run by an ex-bank manager. He said he had never worked for anyone, anywhere, who was more crooked.
That's what I think I said that the last live too. It's like, when have you ever been like, you know who we need to make our lives better? A banker. You know, I only ever had one really good experience with the bank. And the lady was like, here's how the bank's rules work. Here's how you can get around that to make sure that you do well. One of the things that she taught us was that whenever the banks send you a credit card and it's a bank credit card, and we bank with Scotiabank, she's like, accept it. And she's like, then take it and add that credit room to your line of credit, because they are very stingy on handing out line of credit space, but they'll give you a credit card every 2 seconds. And she's like, and credit is credit. So once you have it, add it on. Within probably 3 months of us working with this lady, and she's like, oh, I can help you guys get a mortgage. And she's like, I know how to move that around too. She was gone. And I was like, where'd she go? And they're like, oh, she's been transferred to another branch. I was like, what branch? Because we're transferring too. And they wouldn't tell us. And then I tried looking her up. I couldn't find her. And I was like, man, we had such good relationship with this lady. We knew where, what region and what area she lived in Halifax. I was like, we can't be those weirdos that show up to her house. But I was literally the only person that helped us with the banking system. Everybody else has just been kind of how can we take your money from you? How can we part you from the benefits that you're currently experiencing? And even to this day now, last month I went to add one of the Scotiabank credit cards to my line of credit to just boost that credit room again, and they didn't want to do it. And it was pulling hair, tooth, nail, whatever, to try and get them to do it, and they ended up doing it because I was like, I know it's your policy. And they're like, how do you know that?
You can take the credit card and add it to your line of credit?
Yes. So basically, if you have they're going to give you a credit card increase of $5,000 on a $10,000 credit card. You can take that amount and move it over to a line of credit. So if you had a $20,000 line of credit, you add that 15, now you have a $35,000 line of credit that's sitting at, 8% interest versus the 30 that a credit card would have.
Wow.
And so it's kind of a fun little trick. But like I said, they didn't want to do it. And they're like, we're actually putting a stop to this. We're not going to really do this anymore. And I was like, well, too late. I already know about it.
That's so fascinating. Well, now
everybody knows about it.
Now 2,000 people know about it. Let's go. Buzz Advin says, we need to spread the conservative message together. It'll push through the best of conservative message. I think that's what that said. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what we're here for. Continue to have these conversations, have them with you. And we'll continue to keep this party going, folks. Nucks for Cup. I'm sorry, they're done, man. No, I'm just kidding. I'm a Flames fan, so it's all right. Feels like the BC election all over again. The BC election was weird. I don't like that. But it was weird.
I'm first off, I am a Canucks fan, so.
Boo.
I was very upset when Boston upset them.
This guy's still upset 14 years later.
Yeah, I know, but I wouldn't burn my city down if I. So anyway, whatever. But yeah, it does feel like the BC election, doesn't it? That's the level that it's at, and I'm hoping to God that we don't have a situation where people just mysteriously take home ballot boxes and oh, we found all these votes and suddenly flipped a riding. This is the kind of crap that I'm worried that we're going to see.
Well, someone threw this on our, commented this on one of our videos this week, was like, hey guys, you guys really need to start advocating and pushing for people to volunteer at their polling stations, volunteer as ballot counters, volunteer as overseers, so that we can make sure that there's no fishiness going on at any of these places, which I would agree with. And we're going to do that right now.
That's a really good call out. So whoever that person was, thank you so much for commenting that on the channel, because that's excellent. That's so true. My brother's actually won in his home province. He doesn't live in Nova Scotia, but in his province. Yeah, nice. He does that.
That's amazing. So, yeah, that's how you can that's another way you can get involved, folks. All right. Wow, we are losing ourselves here. It's not like 84 and 93. Both those governments waited for election until the fall. This let people see the incumbents for what they were. Yeah, it's true. Yep. Just Me Nicole says, are you live streaming the debates? I know Northern's Perspective is doing it. Yes, we will be here, and we'll be trash talking the whole way through. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, actually. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. We're going to actually looking to bring some friends on, too, to join us, and stay tuned for those homies.
Yeah,
but
we're keeping that one a little bit of a secret. Once we hit our 100K, yeah. we'll let everything out.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh Dadbod says wife doesn't want a sign on the lawn. There's going to be a sign on the lawn.
I now have a sign on my lawn.
Do you?
I do have a sign on my lawn.
You're officially one of those people.
I'm
now.
officially one of those people, but I got sick of seeing all the liberal signs. I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm putting one on my lawn. People can think what they want. I don't care.
My dad my dad had the exact same conversation with me. He was like, man, I was looking at my neighborhood. Everyone's got liberal signs up. I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I want the conservative people to know who are quietly conservative to know that they have a home here.
Yes.
And he put it up. I was like, that's my parents have never, ever in their lives put a sign on their lawn for politics. This is the first time they're ever doing it.
So what's funny is that my neighborhood, I have a lot of, I kind of snuck into my neighborhood because we bought the house off some folks who were going through a messy divorce. So we got it for a much more favorable price than the rest of the neighborhood. So the rest of the neighborhood is a lot more affluent than we are.
There goes the neighborhood.
We're riding around in our RAV4, from eons ago, and everybody else has got their Teslas and their, Acura MDX, and one guy's got a convertible that he brings out all the time. It's just, they're at a different level. But a lot of them are noofs. It's really funny. So I love them. There's nobody better than a Newfoundlander. And honestly, one of the guys who came over, very well off. He did a really good job in the construction sector. Ended up having a company selling it, and is retired at 45. Wow. And great Newfoundlander guy. He comes over and he's like, I'm glad you got the sign. He's like, I'm voting conservative too. He's like, I just don't advertise it. I'm like, that's fine. You do you. But I think that it really is that. It's people need to show that it's okay to vote for the other side, that you're not a racist, you're not a bigot, you don't hate women, you don't think rights need to be taken away from anybody. Yeah, you know what I mean? The world isn't going to burn, and you're not trying to pollute us all out of, clean air. It just, all these things need to go away, and it happens by showing people that it's okay.
Dude, so tonight was fun because I told you, man, my wife doesn't care about politics, but typically, thinks opposite of me. But she's like, talking about all the things that she's been hearing through the grapevine about Pierre Poilievre and this, that, the other. And so she ended up going through all the issues that her friends have brought up, or connections, whatever brought up. And she starts going through the list. It was like flashcards, man. It's like, Poilievre voted against women's rights. Okay, moving on. No. Poilievre voted against the school food program. Poilievre voted, but the boom. And all the vote of non-confidence that happened, that they purposely put in through Parliament at the time so they could use it for this point in time. Yes, yeah. That's what happened. Yeah, but it's so hard to explain that nuance to people because a lot of people don't understand how even our system works. They just see the headline, they see the inflammatory words, and it's like, he's a bad guy. Can't trust him. He's been a lifetime politician. Get him out of there.
Yeah.
So that's how it goes.
Omnibus bills, and then the other part of it too is just the fact that he wasn't voting against school lunch. He was voting against the bureaucratic meeting of folks who would then use money to hire somebody to study the effects of school lunches. You're not actually buying food for anybody. And that's the one thing the conservatives don't want. They're like, get the consultants out of there. They're taking $17 billion of our taxpayer dollars. Get them out. Yep. We can do it.
Get them out. Out. Michael Hafing says Jugmeat has an OF model joint campaign. NDP will have to change their name to New. Oh man, I'm not finishing that. Holy jumping, y'all are crazy.
Oh man.
Suna Soul Silver says hot take, but you want to get a specific type of non-voters, aka gamers, anime fans. Pierre need to do more anti-DEI policies and anti-censorship, as they have ruined the hobby industry for years. I hear what you're saying. I think the one thing that's actually helping Pierre in this, and I actually wouldn't have believed it before the election, but the one thing that's helping him is actually staying away from culture war issues.
Yeah.
Because like people, like the everyday, like kind of the mainstream doesn't care about that stuff. Like there are pockets of people that really, that stuff really does matter to them. But the mainstream, they're not vibing with it, which is an interesting realization.
And I think that's kind of like, it ties in a little bit to some of the stuff that we saw with CBC. Like I know we ripped on the poll tracker there for a bit, but the other thing I'm going to bring up is the voter compass. That was the other thing that was really ridiculous. So you see a lot of these identity politics things in the voter compass. And so out of the 5 people that I've talked to, which I would consider like maybe one of them to be very more conservative, classically conservative, but the rest of them, very run of the like mill kind of like centrist, liberal, maybe right of center, just kind of in that spectrum, all got beyond conservative, like almost heading into PPC territory on this stupid voter compass. Because the questions they're asking, when we're talking about how you ask the questions and the wording that you put into it, like they're like none of them, they didn't talk about anything to do with housing or anything to do with energy. Like it was just all like, what are your thoughts on transgender? And what are your thoughts on, like,
Canada should end its ties to the monarchy.
The monarchy.
Like what?
Who the hell is talking about the monarchy right now?
Like for real. The prescription of puberty blockers should be banned for adolescents. Like they're hitting all the culture war issues with these.
Yeah.
How much should wealthier people pay in taxes? Like I'm like
the tax the rich, eat the rich commentary.
Like
why are we doing that?
How much federal funding should universities receive? I'm like, who cares? Like it's just like none of that's being talked about in the mainstream right now. But they took all these weird outlier topics and put them in this vote compass, and then all of a sudden spit you out at the end saying, yeah, you're PPC, you're far right. It's like, what the heck? Like I'm just gonna like roll through all these. I'm extremely curious if I don't know to all of them, what happens. How much the federal, okay, that's decent. Speak English, French, yada yada.
But like even if you go back to that speak English, French one, like why are we having that language debate?
Right.
Like, that's not an issue right now for Canadians. Nobody cares. We realize we're a bilingual country.
Mm-hmm. Next, Canada laws against hate speech place too many limits on freedom of expression.
Like that, you know what? I don't care about the freedom of expression right now if I can't afford to feed my family. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the part is like none of these are getting to the fact that there's a housing crisis, an energy crisis, an economic crisis, a fentanyl crisis, like none of this. Oh my God.
Canada should continue providing military assistance to Ukraine to aid in its conflict with Russia. It's like, okay. Canadians should be taxed on the carbon they emit when using fossil fuels. I still don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. Yeah. Indigenous people, natural resources, $10 a day childcare, fun sites, like it just... Boom, 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 boom. Like Quebec being an independent state.
Yeah,
like,
visible minorities, women's sporting leagues. Like,
how much should you reduce its carbon emissions? Like, get out of my face, man. I'm finding it difficult to cope financially on my current income. Yes, finally something real.
Yeah.
Yes, I strongly agree with this. Hey, folks, chat. How trustworthy is Elizabeth May? Let you know the answers, or we're going to give it right now. We're going to give you 5 seconds to vote. Is it from 0 to 10? How much do you trust Elizabeth May, folks? Oh yeah, that's right. We're a little delayed. We're about 10 seconds behind.
Yeah.
0. Zeros across the board. Okay, 0 it is. How trustworthy is Jagmeet Singh, folks? Are we going 0 to 10? How trustworthy is Jagmeet Singh? Oh, zeros in the chat. Zeros in the chat. Okay. How trustworthy is Pierre Poilievre, folks? 0 to 10. What? We are seeing a solid.
Give her a solid.
Give her a solid one. Yeah. All right. Minus 10. All right, Poilievre. We are 10 minutes behind, or 10 seconds behind. Now we're going to start getting to the Pierre Poilievre. Answers are, wow, people are still putting zeros. May is drunk. Everyone's fired up. All right, we're going to put 10 for Poilievre and Green Party guy. Who is this guy, eh?
Okay, so the thing with the Green Party is they have
2 leaders.
Co-leadership model, which basically was they tried to put somebody in place. She flopped.
Yep.
And Elizabeth May was like, this is going to be the death of my party if I don't get back in there and try and like control everything again. But they're like, but we don't want you actually leading. So she's like, well, we're going to do it together.
Yeah. Mark Carney, folks, 0 to 10. How much do you trust Mark Carney, folks? Oh man, that's gonna be a tough one, folks. I love that the extremes that everyone's voting in right now.
Yeah.
There's no in between here.
Well, the problem
It's
is
just zeros
that
for Mark Carney.
we're delayed, eh?
How we feel about Maxime Bernier? How we feel about Maxime Bernier? Now this might actually get a decent range. How much we trust Maxime Bernier? On that 10-second delay. I only trust Leslie if she's drunk. Oh my gosh. You gotta be a troll listening to your live. Yep.
That's hilarious.
That's how we roll, baby. Oh wow. Infinity. Negative
infinity.
a billion. Oh man. Interesting. I'm guessing these are all responses. Oh, here we go. 2 and 4, 3 and 4 for Maxime, 10 for Maxime. Okay, we'll go with a 4. How confident? We're gonna go zeros across the board now.
Yeah.
Boom. Who? I don't even know who you are. I don't even know who you are either. Zero. Anyways. Oh my gosh.
This is just all this is like census level data, basically.
Don't care. Skip. What are my results? You respond don't know too many times to calculate a result. Oh, okay. God, that's how it all works. All right. Well, that was a fun waste of our time. Amazing. All right. Boom. There's a poll that has CPC at 48%. Abacus polled the people that didn't vote in 21. 40% of them are voting. 46% of them are voting for the CPC. Yes, I did see this. And this is actually, I think, one of the best results we've seen this election from the CPC in a poll. They've traditionally been going between 36 and 40%. Them jumping up to 40%, 46%. Those are big numbers. Those are big numbers in this election. Angus says Atlantic Canada needs to understand if Liberals win, it's almost certain Alberta will vote to separate. That ends equalization. I've never seen so much momentum for this in my life. I'm 56. Thoughts? Yep.
We totally agree. And it's what I'm hearing right now from all my friends in Alberta. They're like, if the Liberals get another term, we're done with Canada, because obviously they do not care about us and they're not listening. And they like all they want is our money and they don't want our opinion. And I'm like, yeah, that's fair.
And Danielle Smith made that very clear in her PragerU interview today. I know. Which I was like, yo, let's go, spicy Danielle. Well, just see it.
I honestly, like, I wish that woman would run for Prime Minister of Canada, because I would be so happy to cast a ballot for her.
Yeah.
I think she'd be great.
She is fantastic. They call her the modern Iron Lady.
Yeah.
Love it. That was fantastic. Matthew Kang saying CPC win will be if non-voter turnout, i.e. young men. LPC has a ceiling since boomer turnout always consistently high and doesn't change. Yeah, it's actually really critical. Young men, young people in general are coming and voting conservative, or voting in general, because we're seeing that across the board, that young people are just like, I need a change in government. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, but the gender divide, though, is very interesting amongst that age group.
It's true.
Because
It's true.
I have siblings that are in that age group, and because now I'm an old man.
Oh no!
I had my birthday recently, but basically, what my brother said to me, he said, all of my guy friends who are in that range of 18 to 30 are all voting conservative, and all of the women are voting liberal because they're afraid that somehow they're gonna lose their rights. And it's interesting because I keep seeing a lot of imagery put out there, because I have a lot of liberal friends, and all the women are putting out these like mashup images of Pierre Poilievre, Trump, and then pictures from The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
seeing that too.
Really? Like, this is, and for them, this is a real fear. This is exactly what they're thinking is going to happen, because this is what Jagmeet Singh has told them is going to happen.
Yeah, I'll let them vote in NDP, I guess. Take some. It just reminded me of something that happened earlier today that you brought that up. This guy posted about this. Shout out Jasmine. All right, let's bring this up for the folks. So on this issue, I posted about this today. It says, recently, I've been hearing from some of our listeners that their liberal friends keep bringing up that Poilievre will ban abortion, which is a classic fear-mongering tactic from the left. Regardless of how you feel about the topic is not my point here. This issue is a distraction more than anything. But if this is a sticking point with some of your friends, remind them that one of the major pro-life groups in the country have told their followers not to vote for Poilievre because of his stance of being pro-choice. And I screenshotted them saying red light Pierre Poilievre, which we've known for the past year or so now.
Yeah, I love when you look at it, it says pro-abortion, pro-LGBT ideology.
In both languages.
Yeah.
He said it twice. So that's kind of what you're getting here. So that is something that, if you want to go check out the tweet, send this to your folks, send this to people that are struggling or on the fence about these things. This is like the pro-life groups are not happy with Pierre Poilievre in this country. So that's just the reality of that. We move on to, I just got a call watching this from Nylock. He says, from a pollster watching this, that was an interesting experience. They did ask if I'd be willing to switch my vote. Interesting ask. Wow. Pollsters getting bold.
Nylock, you need to tell us what pollster they represented. What poll.
Yeah. I'm going to wonder if they told you. And then you can just put that in the general chat. We'll catch it. Big D says, why would Alberta stick around with Ontario and Quebec when they show open disdain for them? I don't disagree.
Yeah.
And these are two boys from Nova Scotia. We don't disagree. We understand where the frustration comes from.
Although what you're seeing right now that I would never have imagined. Okay. You're seeing Alberta and Quebec talking about how they can work together.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Remember when we were like talking about how hated Justin Trudeau was, and I said maybe he's actually going to unify the country and hate for him. Like, is this what we're going to see, where the provinces hate the federal government so much that they actually unite with each other and say, "Screw you, federal government, we don't need you."
Yep. Yeah. We posted about this too on April 1st. Says, man, you screwed up as a federal government when Alberta and Quebec aligned to oppose you.
Yeah.
And that was Lego and Danielle Smith talking about provincial rights and fighting against the federal government.
I'm not going to lie. I thought this was an April Fool's joke at first.
Yeah.
When I saw it, because we saw the Maxime Bernier and Pierre Poilievre one.
Yeah.
And, but then when I saw this, I was like, is this another joke? And it's like, no, this is actually true. They are sick of Mark Carney lying to them. So, because he's basically said to their faces, I'm going to do one thing, and then he'll get out at a rally and say the exact opposite.
Which has been crazy to watch.
Yeah.
Like, he's been so two-faced on everything. And then Big D. Oh, yeah, we already talked about that one. That's losing. That we'll go to the general chat now. But this is where things are at. We're going to see Poilievre here wind down the rallies. He's going to be going back to Ottawa here shortly, and he's going to be kind of doing more of these interviews. I liked him doing the Mulrooney interview. Got to see a little bit of his personality there and more of his family side, which is nice to see. And I hope he does more of those, because I think that will win over a lot of people.
Yeah, he spoke differently at that I thought was interesting. Like the entire tone was different. When Ben was asking him certain questions, he's like, well, here's the thing. And he put on like that kind of like very like calm, almost like fatherly voice. And, they're being asked like, you're always so angry. And he's like, well, it is frustrating. And this is why it's frustrating. And it was like a very calm, very in command and control of the conversation and of himself. And I think that I really wish we would have seen more of that, because I think that would have combated a lot of what we're seeing right now, which is that kind of bulldog behavior that we've talked about, where it's, attack, attack, attack. I think you need to balance that a bit with like, by the way, I can attack you, but I can also be calm.
Yeah. I do have two sides to me.
Yeah.
I'm the same way, man. I get it. You've seen on the show, I get wild, start yelling, start punching the mic, have fun. But there's times you just got to, all right, bring down the tone and hit it home. Bring it home, So,
oh my.
Nylock says that the survey was done through Acrobat Research. They are a research survey company, and probably a sub-hire through the big pollsters.
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple of the pollsters that definitely subcontract out. And even, I think it was, I'm trying to remember if it was Ecos that actually like some of the subcontracts, like they'll list them out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. I'll put this question out there. Do you have any questions for me with what went down in Fredericton at all?
I don't know, because I was with you live the entire time.
Yeah, you were watching the whole thing.
I was having fun with the chat, honestly. You guys were amazing on the chat. It was so much fun. I loved that we got to ban all the trolls together. That was a highlight. I was like removing people left, right, and center that were just coming in to just spam the chat. I was like, nope, you're done.
You're out.
I don't know. I guess the question that I would have is, what was the difference between when we went in Halifax at the Marriott to Fredericton? What was the change in temperature of the room?
I don't think there was much of a change. I think in more so than anything, it was actually talking to people who this was their first rally they've ever been to, just getting initiated in politics. And they're just like, yeah, I'm just feeling so frustrated that I had to come to this. I had to see Polyev. I had to see what was going on. And I want to be a part of what this was all about. I see it all the time on YouTube. I see it on TV. I see what the rallies. I love the energy. I just wanted to be a part of it. It's a lot of what it was. But the other thing I have to appreciate about politicians is, well, when you have a group of people who have been feeling hard done by the current establishment, being feeling frustrated, you're going to get a lot of people who just shout out random things. And that's the one thing I'm like, I have to give Polyev credit. I'm like, it would distract the heck out of me if people just kept yelling random things that had nothing to do with what I was talking about. There's one that you may have caught on the live where a guy literally shouted out, "Lock up Mark Carney."
Yeah.
And Polyev played that so well. He's like, because he didn't fully hear it. He had him say it again. He's like, "Oh, we don't need to do that. We just need to vote them out." Which I think was a good way of just kind of let's bring this down. This is not a Donald Trump rally. And we are going to do this in a productive way that we do here in Canada.
Yeah, I love that. But it's funny when you compare the things that are being yelled out at his rally versus Mark Carney's, how many kids did you touch or whatever it was? Like, it's like, oh my God. And then he just threw Carney off. So
what a throwing me too. I'm like, what? Yeah. Allah, Allah. Yeah. He just started talking in French and he's like, Allah.
Mark Carney's French is kind of hilarious. It's just like, I'm going to say the least amount of French words I can possibly say and then switch immediately back to English and throw a lot of ums and ahs in between.
He throws a lot of Franglish in there, doesn't he? Yeah, it's a lot of fun time. Yeah, so I think that's kind of where things are at. I'd love to hear more if anyone went to Oshawa. Curious how that event went. And we go on from there.
Nelson Cade. How many kids, Mark?
Oh, that's so bad.
Oh, man.
So bad. I can't stand the bias. Media says to do. Carney makes me feel creeped out just saying. Yeah. He does give that weird vibe out. He's got that weird smile. Squints. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Mm-hmm. But in general, this was one funny thing that happened. So I walk into kind of the initial, the hangar, I guess, but essentially was like a big exhibition park. And they kind of kept everyone in this big open room, which you would have seen on X. I would have taken photos of this. And they kept them in there because it was pouring rain out. And they're waiting to be able to put them into the main room. So I walk in, I just got there early as media, just want to get my spot on the podium, yada, yada. And I walk in, and I'm like, where do I go? I understand. So I start walking by. And there's one, the gentleman's probably watching right now. But someone catches his eye. He's like, "Hey, Elev8!" And everyone's like, "Yo!" I was just like, yo, this is wild. I'm not used to this. This was different from the Marriott experience, I'll tell you that much. And the best part about this was they turn around, and then the next thing after them saying my name was, "Where's Jasmine?" I was like, oh, we love Jasmine, but she's in Winnipeg right now, folks.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think the Marriott, somebody sent me a picture of the back of my head and was like, "Is this you?" I was like, yeah, that's not weird at all.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a different experience, but as well, driving the 4.5 hours was also different too. But it was fun meeting a lot of different people, a lot of cool scenarios and situations people are in. And I can't wait to bring Reg with me to the next one. So I'd love to see you meet all the people that we're impacting on this channel. So this has been fantastic. I think we can end it there.
Yeah.
In that moment.
Yeah, it's been good hanging out with all you folks and reading your comments. I know we went all over the map tonight, but that's what actually makes these lives the most fun, is being able to kind of touch on all these topics that you guys want to talk about. So yeah, we'll give you a second there to throw your final thoughts in there. And
we do have Garn79 who has a good question. It says, can you guys explain in more detail why women are against Pierre Poilievre? What exactly was he voting against?
Okay, so being as somebody who has a lot of women in my life, binders full of women.
True.
But basically what I'm hearing from them is that they are basically eating up the rhetoric that Jagmeet Singh was peddling in December when he had that like hands off women's rights rally, and it was like no abortions right on the podium, or no anti-abortion, whatever the heck it was. But anyway, basically they're seeing this and thinking that they're going to lose their rights and that they're going to be forced into basically a Handmaid's Tale version of Canada. And what's wild is that their argument has been, you know, oh, well, we didn't think it could happen in the States either, but then it did. I'm like, that's not what happened. Like in the States. And they're like, you can't get an abortion in the States. I was like, that's not true at all. That's factually incorrect. I was like, depending on what state you go to, there's different rules and regulations that are voted on by the people in that state. So unless you think that everybody, you know, in this province is going to vote against you and against your rights, meaning you fundamentally don't trust your fellow Canadians, I mean, you're not going to see that happen.
Yeah.
So, and the other part of it too is that like we've had conservative governments before. That's not their MO. But the Jagmeet Singhs of the world have been so convincing that this is going to happen, and they point to the states and they feed off the misinformation to kind of perpetuate that narrative that's false, and people buy it and people think that that's what's happening. And then it's like what we saw with the whole like biological clock ridiculousness.
Oh my gosh.
Like the amount of women that came out and they're like, don't you tell me about my biological clock. And it's like,
does it not exist? Or he didn't even say the word women.
No, I know.
What the heck? Like what?
And the worst part is like, that is the conversation happening amongst our age group.
Yes.
Is like the 30 to 40 crowd is going, I want a home before I have kids, but that will never be a future. Do I have kids in my future? Like that's a real conversation that's happening right now. And for him to call it out, it was, you know, it was nice to have somebody actually acknowledge that that's the question. Like I'm looking at it going right now, like, okay, I've had one kid. I'd like to have two more, but biologically, I don't know if that's going to be feasible for us because we've had to space them out so much to make sure that we have appropriate maternity leave banks and things like that to cover the cost of things, because it's so expensive right now that it takes 3 paychecks to live where we live. So, and then you add another mouth on top of that and you're like, holy crap, I don't know if I can do it. So they've completely blown that argument out of the water and made it into something that's not, which is really frustrating.
Absolutely. We're going to finish off with this last super chat here. It's Ghost Post 1 says, hey boys, Albany, New Yorker here. Hey, shout out our fellow American. Have been wondering if you guys believe Mincehead Meat Singh is purposely tanking his party so that his constituents go to the more aligned Liberal Party. I don't think he's even that smart.
No.
I just think he's a terrible politician who completely grind his party into the ground for the sake of his paycheck and for the sake of his his pension, and now he's paying the price for that, and his party is done.
Yeah,
the worst level we've seen in a long, long time.
So we'll tell you one thing about Canadian party politics. Basically, when you have a leader there, you can't get them out until they decide to leave.
Yeah, like
that's the part that's like crazy. So when we had Justin Trudeau in power, the establishment Liberals wanted him gone. He didn't want to go. So he wasn't gone. And then it wasn't until the very last minute when they finally got him to leave. It's the same thing happening with the NDP party. Like basically, folks within the NDP circles have said outwardly that they don't support Jagmeet Singh, that he's ruining their party, that they don't want him there. He doesn't have the same values that they have, and they can't get rid of him. Yeah. And nobody can say anything outwardly about him because he has the control over whether or not they stay on the ballot.
Yeah.
So they're looking at this going, we can't get rid of this guy. And if I say anything against him, he's going to kick me out of the party. So we're stuck.
Yeah.
And we're just seeing the death of the NDP.
And then to add to that, it's actually the Conservative Party is the only of the three that actually has mechanisms to vote out and oust a leader.
Exactly.
Liberals and NDP do not have that. So it's like, figure it out, y'all. Y'all are in a mess. So anyways, we will end it there. Y'all are awesome. So I'll see you tomorrow afternoon with an afternoon segment. I'll be taking Friday morning off because that's typically what I do on these Thursday night shows because I typically record the night before and I'm tired right now. So you guys are awesome. So whatever it is you're doing, whether you be going to the gym,
heading to work,
or going for a walk. Whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are. We love you. We're out. Peace.